One who is able to cast off the limitations of ego and improve the quality of his consciousness through disciplinary use of the imagination is able by means of direct identification to become one with the secret self, and thus attain to a measure of its power for perfection. The potential for achieving this astounding goal lies within each of us. By means of inner mental ascendancy and pictorial definition, a man may become one with the purposes of the secret self, and thus become infallible in his works and his goals. This is a pretty big capsule to swallow. Our materialistic society, with its reverence for the products of science, has excised 3/4 of our mentality. We have concerned ourselves too much with the world, what it is, what is in it, how we can use it, and today we know little more of the origins and purposes of life than we did before men were able to read and write. It is difficult when we know something of the principles of the gasoline engine, the generation and transmission of electricity, the refining and tempering of steel, of electronic and radio transmission, to admit the possibility that something radically opposed to the viewpoint of science could have a foundation in fact. Science says the laws of nature are supreme, and man must learn to live with them in order to prosper. Now comes this diametrically opposed theory. Nature is subservient to mind. Not the mind of man as we know it, but the supreme mind or secret self that lies behind life. And this secret self is within each of us. We can come to know it and to use it, and thus transcend the laws of nature and free ourselves from bondage to the senses and the material world. Thoughts become things. What is going on in life is the evolution of the individual to complete oneness with the secret self. The universal being that lies behind creation has differentiated into finite form, taken disguise, so to speak, in order to work out the manifold sides of its infinite and eternal nature. Therefore, the man who expands his consciousness is fulfilling the fondest wish of life. It is not necessary that we become saints to understand as much of the secret self as is necessary to use its powers in our affairs. To know this law is enough. Whatever we accept as a permanent mental image in our consciousness must manifest in our world, for we become in life what we are in consciousness, and nothing can alter that fact. It takes a great deal of courage to admit to yourself that if you are sick, frightened, frustrated, or defeated, you have brought these conditions on yourself, and no one but yourself can get rid of them. Occasionally, someone so afflicted will experiment with the power of his mind to cure him, but will give it only the most cursory trial. If, for example, he is ill and in pain, he might say, "I visualized myself well and happy, but I hurt just as much as ever." What he didn't do above all things was visualize himself well and happy. He visualized himself sick and in pain. The moment he began to visualize himself well and happy, he would become well and happy. This is not a law that works once in a while, or part of the time, or on auspicious occasions. It works all of the time, and it works in the exact same way. And it is returning to you right now in the material world the images you maintain in your mind. You cannot escape them. They surround you, sustain you, or torment you. They are good or evil, or uplifting or degrading, or exalting or painful, according to the vision that prompts them. And as long as you are alive, as long as you think and imagine, you are literally surrounded day and night by the images that predominate in your consciousness. Thought control. The startling power of the secret self is that it always makes manifest the image it beholds. Nothing illustrates this fact better than the current experiments with hypnosis. A man may be in such excruciating pain that even narcotics will not relieve him, but he can be put under deep hypnosis and told that there is no pain at all, and presto, there is no pain. He may have a deep and abiding fear of crowds, but under hypnosis it can be suggested to him that he likes crowds, and lo and behold, he enjoys them most of all. He can become stronger, healed of disease, smarter, more aggressive, possessed of endurance and indomitableness. all because these things are impressed upon his psyche as facts, and the image in his mind grows from them. Aha! The cry goes up. Find me a good hypnotist. I want to be smart and strong and successful and all those good things, and to be rid of weakness and pain and failure. And hypnosis can do it too, if you are willing to abdicate as the person in charge of your life. If you are willing that someone else run it every hour of every day throughout the whole of it, then you can turn your life over to a hypnotist and he can remake it in the image you outline. However, it will make small difference to you. You may still be in the vehicle, but you no longer will be driving. If effort and strife and the overcoming of obstacles are the spurs to growth that the secret self intends them to be, then surely you will have abdicated from life itself. You need no hypnotist to put the power of the secret self to constructive work in your life. No hypnotist can overcome the negative image-making of your mind unless he is with you 24 hours a day. You are the only one in constant rapport with yourself, and thus you are the only one able to police the thoughts and images you entertain. If you let the image be prompted by something outside you, then you exercise no control over your life. If you accept images only in accord with your desires, then life will deliver your inner goals. In any case, the magnificent promise of the secret self is this: you can change your life by altering the images in your mind. For what comes to you in the end is only that which you have been accepting in consciousness. Now, there are many people who agree with this premise, but are quick to point out that the images in the consciousness of most persons are projected there from the subconscious and are not of their own choosing. Most schools of psychotherapy apparently feel this way, for they propose a tedious and time-consuming treatment bent on expurgating from the subconscious memories of painful and bitter occasions which might prompt unpleasant images in the mind. 7 or 8 years of this process have not noticeably emptied painful memories from the subconscious of most patients, and in any case, if a treatment is truly efficacious, it cannot possibly consume so long a time. The saddest thing about the modern put-the-blame-elsewhere school of psychoanalysis is that the person undergoing it accepts it as justification for his failure to police his consciousness, and thereafter expects such policing to be accomplished by having the neighborhood rid of criminals. If he achieves some semblance of a changed consciousness in the hands of the psychiatrist, he soon goes back to a world full of negative thoughts and ideas, and just because he does not police his own mind, they readily find acceptance there. You may not be able to alter the positions of the stars, to stop the earth from revolving, to cause the winds to blow, or the sea to calm. But you can choose what you will think. You can think what you want to think. You can think only in response to an inner vision and a secret goal, and if you take your stand with a firm heart and a high resolve, you will be successful, and you will not be intimidated, and you will project your image clear and true, and its counterpart will return to you in the world. Dry Hole Casey. In a little village on the western slopes of the Great Divide lived a man whose entire life had followed one ignominious pattern. For 35 years he had been an oil well driller and had followed the frontiers of oil exploration throughout the United States. During that time, he had drilled 44 wildcat wells, and not one of them had made a strike. He had drilled in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Louisiana, California, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, Wyoming, and still he had not hit. Oil operators wouldn't hire him anymore. He became known as Dry Hole Casey, a nice guy, but strictly out of luck. Finally, he took a job in a Colorado mine and eked out his days without hope. He kept his drilling rig, though. It was his first love. Weekends would find him in the backyard lubricating and cleaning its parts, handling them with ritualistic care. One day in late spring, when the snow stood in broad, glittering fields on the slopes of the mountains, and the rivers and streams were high and roily, he wandered up into the woods and sat gazing over the valley. The valley was a basin hemmed in on 3 sides by precipitous intrusions of granite, and these mountains had been productive of many minerals: lead, zinc, silver, tungsten, manganese. Our friend gazed to the west, to where the basin sloped down to a plateau. Suddenly his mind formed the perfect picture of a faulted anticline, a predominant type of subsurface oil trap. The image seemed superimposed over the scene before his eyes, so that he could almost see the oil below the surface of the ground. He trembled before his vision, could not resist it. It seemed like a sudden visitation from heaven, and he left the mountainside absolutely certain that within the small valley lay a major oil field. Next day he quit his job in the mine, and with his savings managed to procure oil lease options on the land he visualized as being the most favorable. Now he had to raise capital to complete his leasing arrangements and provide funds to drill an initial well, a gargantuan task, since everyone who knew him knew also his history of failure. But the vision in his mind persisted. It led him to take a bus to an eastern city in quest of funds. It led him, after a week of discouragement, to a park bench and a seat alongside an elderly man who quietly and patiently fed the squirrels. It was a bright, warm day, and the squirrels were active, playing and clowning over the proffered food, and the two men laughed at their antics. And each told stories of other squirrels and other times, and agreed that the foibles of humanity were not shared by animals. Warmed at each other's company, they agreed to lunch together at a nearby restaurant. In the course of the luncheon, the oil driller told his newfound friend of his vision and his problem. His friend was interested, questioned him closely about the vision he had had on the mountainside, seemed impressed that it persisted. "How much money do you need?" $50,000, replied the oil well driller. "I will provide it," the man said suddenly. "We will be equal partners." It seemed incredible, but there it was, a chance acquaintanceship on a park bench, and the money was provided. It is almost anticlimactic to relate that the subsequent well discovered a rich oil field. There simply was no alternative, and the man who put up the money knew that it would. He had had sufficient experience with the power of inner vision to manifest in the world to be absolutely sure of his position. He did not dwell for a moment on his partner's previous failures, only on the vision that possessed him now. Dissolving the mask of vanity. What strange alchemy prompted our oil driller to have this clear vision in his mind, a vision that subsequently made him a rich man, when his whole previous life had been one unbroken line of failure? Surely the wells he had drilled before had been drilled in response to a vision too. Why should they have failed? They failed because the vision he possessed then was one of failure. Sure, he would have denied it, but it was true. Perhaps a sense of the great hazard connected with searching for oil lay at the crux of his subconscious. Perhaps he felt that the odds were against him. Perhaps he was conscious of the fact that there are millions of acres of land without oil under them. In any case, his vision was one of failure, from whatever cause, and he was led into those arrangements that would inevitably cause him to put his drill bit down in barren soil. And in two cases where he actually had drilled on productive land, he once had ceased making hole only 27 feet above the productive formation, and another time failed to make a test of a sand that later produced several million barrels. But he could not help himself. He was only following the dictates of the vision in his mind. See how different his behavior was in the discovery of the basin field? He saw the oil. He knew it was there. There was not the slightest doubt in his mind, and that is the way he acted. There was no resisting him this time. His vision was for production, and that is what resulted. Why? Why did he finally have a positive vision after harboring a negative one for so many years? Such a question could not be answered with certainty without making an intensive study of the man, but in all probability, the debilitating and crippling factor was fear. Fear, more than any other single thing, warps and distorts our vision. Our oil driller most likely was afraid of failure, and his apprehension twisted his inner vision from success to defeat. He couldn't win as long as the fear stayed with him. Finally, when he had reached the absolute bottom, when the business he loved had rejected him, and the men in it no longer would hire him, fear